morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Soul Brother once again with a remedy to help cure your ills. I want to talk about an event that took place May 30th, 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was uh, dubbed by Booker T. Washington, that community, as Black Wall Street. Um, we got to remember something. This is at a time when black folk, many of them were not that removed from slavery, and they did well economically, but not just that community in Tulsa. There were others. Rosewood, Florida, Allensworth, California, places like that. They did pretty well. They were self-contained. All right. Well, as you can imagine, that was a big deal for those times. And contrary to the narrative that's out there, black folk were doing for self, to borrow from the Nation of Islam, doing for self. It's interesting to note that um, the way this narrative has been structured, black folks weren't quote unquote doing for self until Elijah Muhammad and them came on the scene, which is fundamentally false. But not only is it fundamentally false, it is insulting to suggest that black folk were just languishing or just kicking back, doing nothing and waiting until Elijah Muhammad Nation of Islam come on the scene. But that's a whole nother topic. So I'm going to resist the urge to go down that rabbit hole. But just know and understand that we were doing things, and um, this was a very good community. It was respected. People who lived in that community were very dignified. They conducted themselves in a dignified manner. And I don't want to hear this stuff about Victorian age and all that other kind of crap. No, um, this is beyond no Victorian norms and Victorian age. That gets overused in many ways. But anyway, let me continue. Um, One of the people who come out of that community was the historian, um, Dr. John Hope Franklin. He was from that community. Now, he born 1915. His father was an educated man, was a lawyer. All right. Well, on May 31st, uh, there was an incident that happened. Dick Rowland, who was a shoeshine boy, was in an elevator, and there was a young white girl by the name of Sarah Page who was an elevator operator. Somehow, we don't know what happened. We may never know what really happened, but um, somehow when the elevator was moving, he either slipped or fell on her or something, and she screamed out. Well, given the times, this is 1921, and when it comes to the whole thing about black males, black females, it's a real dangerous situation that gets to be like risky business. So he runs out, panics, obviously, and understandably so. And there comes a point when the authorities come to his house, take him to jail, um, and there were a lot of things happening. There was some black men. Mind you, I said this is 1921, so this is not long after World War One. So you had World War One vets, black men who were vets in the community, and they had a transformative um, effect on white folks. They were electrified, if you will. And I'm not sure the amount of black men who showed up, but it was quite a few of them. And that, of course, bugged the white men. And so one thing led to another. Then a fight breaks out, and then they start tearing up the city. Well, we need to be clear about something. That incident or alleged incident that happened in the elevator was an excuse to tear up the city. If anybody remembers, back in 1997, there was a movie directed by our brother John Singleton, may he rest in peace. He did it in the movie Rosewood. I'm bringing it up to say this. On BET, Esther Rolle, who played Aunt Sarah in the movie, said it wasn't about, it was a similar situation that happened in Rosewood. But she said on camera, it wasn't about who did it. It was just an excuse to go after every black man or something to that effect. Well, I'm saying that to say that that incident was used as a pretext to go in on Tulsa. Well, as you know, or some of you might not know, that uh, one of the horrible things that happened was that white folks attacked the black community. Bombs were dropped on the community from the sky, yes. And this is before the 1985 incident that happened in Philadelphia with Move, the organization. That's a whole nother conversation. But that happened. Um, and so black folk were traumatized by what happened in Tulsa. Absolutely traumatized, okay? As you could imagine. Now, again, you're talking about a generation who not that long out of slavery, not that long, whose grandparents, in some cases, parents were enslaved on the plantation, and they're still alive, and they're dealing with this, and this is post-slavery. And this is what I'd call when racism was you were confronted with suffocating racism, suffocating. Well, the thing is, um, in spite of suffocating racism that existed at that time, black folk were able to thrive economically in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as well as the other communities I just mentioned. There was a bunch of others. I don't have the names in front of me. There's a bunch of them at that time. I think that's remarkable that here you have a people who, not that long out of slavery, were able to do what they did, and it was much to the dismay of the white folks who wanted to hold on to this racist outlook. Because that's the thing. You know, you have people who walking around who want to believe certain things because they have an emotional investment in a negative outlook. And the thing is, that was much to their dismay because think about it, the black people in that community, just Tulsa alone, like you're going to the others, but just look at Tulsa because that's the topic here. They were going through what they were going through, and they were able to persevere. And when you look at what was going on in Tulsa, it ran counter to what had happened, what was shown in the movie 6 years prior, Birth of a Nation, where you show black folks who were portrayed as a bunch of buffoons and coons and everything else. Well, those whites who had a negative outlook on black folk, that's one of the things that fueled their racism, truth be told, when they saw that, when they saw these industrious people, industrious. And I think it needs to be noted that the um, industriousness of black folk at that time was taking place at the same time that Marcus Garvey was here. I say that to say this. It's clear that black folk in America didn't need Mr. Garvey. This is no shade on him, but didn't need Mr. Garvey to teach them about being industrious. Now just let that one marinate for a minute, okay? Because what was happening in Tulsa, again, that didn't come out of, excuse me, the page book of Mr. Garvey. That was on their own. But anyway, so damage was done. The community was destroyed. Black folk fled, went other places, and in many instances, never discussed the incident or the tragedy, I should say. So they had children and grandchildren, grew up not knowing about what went down because, again, they were traumatized. That's a very painful chapter in their lives. And again, you have to factor in you're talking about a community of people who, many of them, had just come out of slavery. The older ones, definitely. So their children are maybe one, possibly two generations removed from slavery. And again, this is suffocating racism they had to deal with. Well, anyway, um, I think it needs to be noted that black folks created their own economic oasis against the backdrop of institutional racism. And again, when this is when lynchings were taking place, and um, black folk were called all kind of derogatory names, um, and all of this. And make no mistake, they did not like white folk. That is, they did not like the fact that these black folks were doing well. They have always had a problem with us doing for ourselves, carrying ourselves in dignified manners. And by the way, that community consisted of black folks who had very good, strong values. If that community consisted of people who had the kind of reckless values that we have today, they would not have lasted a year, if not 6 months. They would have been on the road to self destruction, sure enough. Well, fast forward. Um, I think it's important to pay proper homage to those elders who were survivors. You have some, very few left, who are surviving. We got to hold on to them, and not just those who came out of Tulsa, but who came out of other communities. Um, Talk to people in your family who uh, survived those times. I just thank God that I have a relative, mine down south, who is 100, Lord willing, should be 101 later this year, and was able to inform me of a lot of things that were happening back during the day. And that's something I'll always treasure. Um, there's a brother named Demario Solomon Simmons who's been in the fight for a while. He's an attorney. He's been fighting for reparations for those folk, their descendants of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Those of y'all who are in the clouds and you're from Tulsa, Oklahoma, you have a lot to be proud of. In spite of the fact that that community was met with tragedy, again, there's a lot to be proud of. Oklahoma has a very good history in spite of that tragedy. And that's the thing about America. Everything about America is not doom and gloom. You got your positive and you got your negative. And so those things that are positive, you got to celebrate those things. Don't be a killjoy and just focus on the negative. In fact, the negative that existed and exists, that should be used as a way to fuel you. Because here's the thing, while those many of our people who were around way back in the day are no longer with us, obviously, and those who are, they're very few. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about those who have since passed on. Um, they didn't survive for us to be here and not put our shoulders to the wheel and pull. What I'm suggesting is this: we're duty bound. Every last one of us have a moral obligation to carry the baton and go forward. That is essential. That is essential. It really is. So, um, I would suggest to those in the clouds to check out a book by a man named Death in a Promised Land by Scott Ellsworth. This was published in 1982. It's been out for a while, but I would encourage you to get that book. It's not very thick, but it's not the quantity, it's the quality. And I'm telling you, that is an excellent book in my judgment. There are a few other books that are out there, but that one there, and I said, I would encourage you to share it with your children, um, share it with your spouse, share it with your man friend, lady friend, whomever, other friends, other relatives. Share that with them, and have that in your library. Go over that. One of the things that happened, unfortunately, was years later, black folk in that community in the 1970s were victims of urban renewal, and that urban renewal became a big problem during the 1970s. In fact, it was not just happening there in Oklahoma, but it was happening in other places as well. That's always a problem because what ends up happening, people lose their homes because they get torn down. They build on freeways, etc., etc. That's always an issue. Um, there was a church, Vernon AME Church, is where some people survived due to a wall in that church. So anybody who's from that area, or even if you're not from there, please go to visit. Go do it like a make a family trip. I don't think we do that enough. We need to make family trips, man. I mean, when let's say school gets out, you go to the for the summer, take a drive, take a train, plane, take a train, plane, whatever mode of transportation you choose, and go there, make it a family event, and use that as a way to educate um, your children. We don't educate our children enough about our history in this country. We really don't, and that's highly, in my judgment, highly negligent. Okay, let's not be negligent with this, but and also learn to treat our ancestors who were victims of trauma with respect and be more sensitive to them, those who have passed on, because they went through a lot. They really did. Trauma is no joke. And there's a lot of onion peeling, there's a lot of unpacking that needs to be done. But I think that's important. But I wanted to hop on here and talk about that because it's important. It's an important part of our history. I think that it's good that in recent times people are talking about it. I mean, when I was growing up, that's not something that was talked about in school. I learned this in college, but it wasn't talked about during my K through 12. For the most part. And from what I understand, those who were from Oklahoma, who were born and raised there, a lot of them didn't learn this until years later. One man, he said he got grown. It was when he learned that, but he didn't know this growing up. And he's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Why? Because again, trauma. People had been traumatized by that whole experience. So a lot of times, the best way to protect oneself is to not discuss it. That goes for anything. You found the same thing with some people who came out of uh, the other experiences, whether it be the Jews in the Holocaust, the Japanese with the internment camps, etc. So that's just that's the human experience, if you will. So on that note, I'm gonna end here. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Please comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you have any ideas of some other shows that you'd like to hear me do, please let me know. Until the next time, God bless and enjoy and do what you can to educate yourself about this um, part of our history going into the weekend. God bless.